just like Nixon. He knew the reporter was going, but the others didn't. But of course, Nixon made the mistake of thinking that no one would ever find these. There, in one of the discussions, and I'm going to shorten this, but we don't, in the profession, collectively connect the dots. And the dots are there to be collected. Real quick. May 25th was the murder of George Floyd in Minnesota. About 6 days later, I did one of my interviews with Trump. And I said, Mr. President, now, George Floyd, and did you see the video of it? And Trump said, yeah, he watched it, and it was gruesome and awful. And I said, now, your dad, we know about your dad, created a world of privilege for you. My father was a judge in Illinois, and we need to understand from the point of privilege that we have what black people and minorities are going through in this country. And he said, oh, Bob, you really drank the Kool-Aid. Kool-Aid. And I said to him, this is not Kool-Aid. This is what's going on in your country. So, about a week later, Trump decides that the protests in the United States are a real threat to the country, and he wants to call it, there's what's called the Insurrection Act passed in 1807 that allows the president to use U.S. military troops to put down what he deems an insurrection. So they're talking about this in the White House, and Mark Esper, who is the Secretary of Defense, actually an incredibly well-connected, I mean, he fought in the first Gulf War in 1991, 30 years earlier, as an officer, Esper did. So he hears this talk, and so he goes public and says, I don't believe we have to invoke the Insurrection Act, that the National Guard can take care of this. We don't want to have combat troops come into the city with rifles and so forth, and Esper does this publicly. So Esper goes to the White House, and Trump says to him, you took away my authority by saying that. You are not the President of the United States. I am the goddamn President of the United States. Now this is in June. Trump loses the election, as we know from all empirical evidence, on November 3rd, 2020. A week later, what does Trump do?
He leads the insurrection.
Yes, well, that it came. Yes, that's absolutely true. But the first thing he did, a week later, he fires Esper in a really ugly, nasty way by tweeting, the Secretary of Defense is terminated. And so, a week after that, November 10th, Gina Haspel, who's Trump's CIA director, and a strong woman, somebody who actually watched waterboarding when she was a case officer and a supervisor, really tough, trained analyst about foreign leaders and leadership and so forth. And she sees that Esper's been fired, somebody completely qualified. And she talks to General Milley, who's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And here's what she says, quote, it is a right-wing coup. This is insanity. The president is acting like a 6-year-old with a tantrum. Now you start, and then there's another chapter and another chapter with Trump, and the public, you get some of this, you get some of that. We live in that world, but when you connect the dots, you understand. And I learned about connecting the dots from Carl when we worked on Watergate. And he would say, I was new. I'd been a reporter for about
6 minutes.
You know, you never get a break from this guy. It was 10 minutes. And he said rightly, he said, we've got to go, we can't go to offices to talk to people. And we've got to knock on doors. And win over volunteers. And, you know, you work the money trail really hard. Found the bookkeeper, the treasurer, and but we had the time, we had the support of the Washington Post to make sure that we had the time. They kept going, you know, keep going, keep working on this story. Where are we on Watergate? And we were, you know, I always joke, I was 11 and you were 12. Yeah, you were 28 and I was 29. And the whole environment of the Post, and Ben Bradley, the editor, was, you have running room. Go get the story.
I just want to add one thing, and that is, I think there's an awful lot of great reporting being done today. Not enough of it in this country, but all around the world, there are two things going on. First of all, there are brave journalists in terrible places who are connecting the dots. It's true in the former communist East. It's true in Russia, where reporters are dying. There are nonprofit news organizations in South America that are doing great stories. And I think, just one example, go to your computer and look up Pegasus, which is a joint reporting enterprise done by a number of kind of consortium of news reporters and organizations. I think there is running room, but not enough at our major institutions in this country. Very few is there running room in this country, and I think that it shows. But then you look elsewhere. There's both running room and bravery that we ought to take a look at.
But in this